The state of Texas recently passed a law that some are calling unconstitutional, and those who call it unconstitutional are typically those who are advocates for a plant-based diet, and not in a live and let live kind of way, but in a more militant, political, ideologically driven means of doing that. It was State Bill 664 in Texas, signed on June 1st into law by the governor. What it requires the food manufacturers to do is to clearly label alternative meats as such, to make sure that they are labeled as analogs to meat, or plant-based, or meatless, or any of those other kinds of things. Specifically plant-based as well. Now, the defenders of this, if you look at some of our old friends at Veg News or other vegan propaganda websites, they will tell you that labeling something as plant-based is typically a selling point for these items. As we know, those of us who follow the industry for the alternative meats and the ideologues behind them who want to essentially use market forces to force you off of eating animal products on a regular basis, it's not really a selling point. All you really got to do is go into your grocery store, go look at the fake meats alternatives, which are often sold right next to the actual natural animal products, and you'll see that they sell very less by comparison and are often much more expensive than actual ground beef and the other things they try to mimic. A number of reasons for that, of course, and one is, again, basic market forces. If there was the demand for it, the products would fly off the shelves, the manufacturers would have an influx of cash, they would then use said cash, said profits, to get investors, to expand their operations, and make more of the stuff available. That's simply not the case. They try to tell you the stuff tastes like actual meat. As someone who tried a fake meat burger a few years ago before going on embracing carnivore and keto, I can tell you they don't. I don't mean like the old Morningstar Farm stuff, like 20 years ago, the fake chicken nuggets and fake chicken patties tasted as real as a chicken patty from like McDonald's or something. I don't mean that stuff. I mean Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers and those things. Those things don't taste like meat, no matter how much they try to tell you that they do. And that's part of the problem for them. But remember, also, when understanding this, that the reason those products don't sell is that the typical vegan isn't actually the target audience for that. A typical health-conscious vegan is not looking to eat a bunch of fake meat that bleeds when you cook it, as Beyond Meat does. In fact, I don't think these labeling laws in Texas go far enough. Those laws should require people to be warned that there are some ingredients that have never actually undergone rigorous testing by the FDA or the USDA for safety, like I believe it's called heme. It's the compound that is essentially laboratory made in the fake meats that causes a lot of these fake meats to bleed or to create a simulacrum of bleeding when you cook it, when you bite into it. I've never understood, of course, why it is a vegan would want to eat a plant-based meat alternative and have the thing bleed when they bite into it. You would think it would remind them of all the things that they were trying to get away from. But again, they're not the target audience for it. The target audience is the typical consumer, who has been ground down with decade upon decade of propaganda telling them that meat is not healthy and that you should eat nothing but plants. In fact, there's some recent data that unfortunately says that a lot of Americans still believe that meat is not as healthy as the rest of us actually know it is, and that they think that plant-based meats are actually not a bad idea. They just aren't ready to make the switch. That data is scary because it tells us that it's only a matter of time before the propaganda grinds people down. This in spite of the fact that during an economic downturn, because we've been in one now for at least a year, despite what the political figures out there will tell you, meat sales have gone up. They just have. I've reported on that numerous times on this channel in the past year. Meat sales have gone up. Red meat especially. It seems that people have realized that it doesn't actually save you money at all to go eat out. Instead, you can just go buy the steak, learn to cook the steak or the brisket or whatever it is you're going to go out to eat, make it yourself. You probably have a lot of leftovers, and you might actually make it better. For example, I learned that in doing so myself, that I make better barbecue than the vast majority of barbecue restaurants. It just is a simple fact. Plus, I can control completely what spices go on the meat that I have. and no sugar goes on the meats that I make at home, which is not the case at any barbecue restaurant you go to. But the typical consumer is the one who is the target audience for the fake meats out there. They're the ones who might actually want to have their mind fooled when they bite into a Beyond Burger and it's cooked, quote, medium rare. So when they bite into it, it, quote, bleeds. Again, of course, when you eat actual ground beef, it's not blood coming out. We know that. But that's the language that the plant-based advocates use because they want to essentially trick you into thinking this stuff is real. And I would favor having those labels placed on all the meats, fake meat items, in general, because we don't know what the long-term side effects are. This stuff hasn't been tested. And there isn't really a good way to test what the long-term side effects are. Are you going to take a captive population and make them eat nothing but Beyond Meat for several years to find out what happens? You're going to run into some ethics problems when doing that. But the vegans out there, again, these are not your typical health-conscious, live and let live vegans. These are more your ideological ones. They question whether these labeling laws are, well, constitutional, because they make a free speech claim that they have the right to label things as meat that are not meat. This gets down to a basic sort of ontological question or metaphysical question. What is meat? It's a good question. Now, most of us would say, well, meat comes from an animal, right? And then we use, like, just offhandedly, linguistically, we'll describe some plants as having a meaty flavor, and that's kind of where we get into the problem. See, the thing is, in several states, most of them in the South, there have been attempts to essentially protect the cattle industry by placing labels on meat alternatives, these plant-based alternatives to meat, the Beyond Meats and things. And in those states, the state courts have thrown them out as unconstitutional. Seems absurd to me, but I will remind you that in a lot of states, the courts in the states, all the way up to their state Supreme Courts, are elected. And what does that mean? That means campaign contributions. If you go to those judges who make said rulings, I'll bet you'll find agriculture dollars there. Because believe it or not, behind all of this plant-based push is the agriculture industry. Because the meat industry doesn't have as quite a nice profit margin as growing endless fields of soybeans and other plants. That's the unfortunate reality. It's a reality many people don't want to face. That the system, food regulatory system, all the way and as well as medical system, everything is bought and sold by political dollars, by campaign finance money. And until that changes, we're going to have some serious problems with our regulatory issues. But I'm curious, would you support labeling plant-based foods as what they are, instead of allowing them to be sold next to meat at the grocery store? Or at least not without specific labeling, letting people know that, hey, this isn't actually meat. You should be aware that this isn't meat. Or as is some of these companies getting ready to launch meat plant-based blends, where they'll have ground beef blended in with the plant-based meats as sort of your training wheels stuff to get you off of animal products entirely. Now, not all grocery stores, of course, sell this stuff side by side with meat. Walmart near me, and probably near you, typically sells Beyond Meat products. Some of them are in the meat case, but most of their Beyond Meat products are with the processed vegan foods in the frozen aisle. And I'm perfectly fine having them there. If you want to eat that stuff, that's your business. Just don't try to sell it to me as meat. Would you support these kind of labeling laws, or do you think that the courts are right that this is a First Amendment issue and that these businesses essentially have a right to lie to us? Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. As does sharing this on social media. That helps too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for your time.